Kind of briefly, for anybody who doesn't know, and just because I needed something to talk about, when I was about 5 or so, I walked down the aisle at a revival at our church and accepted Jesus into my heart. And in my teenage years, I was active in the church. My entire family was Southern Baptist primarily. There were some Catholics on my mom's side, but they worshiped Mary and never going to hell. So in my teenage years, I was really active in church voluntarily. My folks didn't make us go to church. They would have, except that we liked going. The only thing I didn't like to do was get up early on Sunday, or pretty much any day. I'm not a morning person. And but we were in church Sunday morning, Sunday night. Monday nights we would go out to do visitation. On Sundays people would fill out the "yes, I'm a guest and I want you to come annoy me" cards. And then on Monday we would go and annoy them and knock on their door. And they're like, "Really? You guys, I thought nobody was ever going to do anything." Wednesday night we were in church services. Thursday and Friday nights we were active with youth group stuff. And then in the summers we would take various mission trips. I remember going over to Illinois to help rebuild a tiny little white church, which you would have loved. And we kind of helped redo some structural stuff on it, worked with those communities. I went to summer camps, Lake Windermere in the Ozarks. And how many people seen Jesus Camp? Yeah. So my summer camps were like that, but without the cardboard cutout of Bush or any other president. They weren't quite as overt about politics, but it was very similar as far as the mission and the message that we all received. And so in my teen years, I started to realize what it was all about, or at least what I understood it to be all about at that point. And I got thinking, hey, if I'm just now beginning to understand this stuff about God, how can I possibly have understood it when I was 5? So maybe I'm not saved. Maybe I've just been one of these going to church, Christian in name only people. So I better get saved, or get saved again. And this started a process that I talked about before it was common in my Southern Baptist church. I'm from other Southern Baptists and Pentecostals and others that I've talked to. It's common elsewhere. And it's this guilt cycle where you are made to feel inferior, because we are, to God. It's just the way it is. Sorry, God's this perfect guy, and he wants you to measure up. And you're never going to do it, but you're going to keep on trying. And so you come in on Sundays and you get your dose and you feel rejuvenated after being made to feel miserable for all the things you did the rest of the week. And then you go out the next week and you do it all over again. And so it's this cycle of, I can't meet up to the expectations, but I'm going to keep trying, and I'm going to keep rededicating my life to Christ over and over and over again. And I'm pretty sure that every kid in our youth group thought that they were going to be a minister, and the parents of most of them thought that they were going to be ministers, and some of them were. I know that that's the path that I was kind of convinced I was on, and some might say I ended up there in a roundabout way. But I left and went in the Navy for 8 years, and then came to Austin and worked in the tech industry for a couple of years, and then around, and I was a believer during all this time, but I was not active anymore. I don't like to play up that I spent my life as a Bible thumper, and Matt was going to seminary and was going to be a minister and stuff. That happened kind of late. When I got laid off from Dell, I didn't want to work in the tech industry anymore, and so I decided, okay, what am I going to do? And the idea that God had wanted me to be a preacher, but that I had run away from this calling because I was terrified of public speaking, inspired me, but and because I had a girlfriend and wanted to get married and all this other stuff. So I sat down and said, okay, God, if that's what you want me to do, I'll do it. And that started about 18 months or so of prayer and study and interaction. And I met with ministers, and my uncle, who was, he used to be a medical missionary, now he's a doctor in the Dallas area. And I worked through this all with the intent of going to school, going to seminary, becoming a minister, whatever was God wanted me to do. It turned out God wanted me to be an atheist. And so he went to great effort to make sure that there was no good evidence for his existence, and to make sure that everything that I had ever been taught was based on entirely flimsy footing. And so this is all part of his master plan.
Just wrote it down.
And, who am I to challenge God? So I was working at Harcourt. Tracy's not here today. it was funny that we both ended up working at the same place kind of incidentally. But the people at work knew that I had started getting more active into this atheism stuff. And I was writing things for online sites. And they kept coming up to me saying, hey, you know there's this atheist TV show here in Austin. And I was like, oh yeah, really? There is? Oh yeah, it's on Sunday afternoons on public access. And I was like, okay, whatever. And I just ignored it. And why do I want to watch a show with a bunch of people who agree with me? Because I wanted to be challenged more than that. I was more interested in kind of interacting with believers and helping to fix all of them because they're all wrong just like I was. That was what my mindset was at the time. And I stumbled across the show one day and realized, oh, it's a call-in show and they're actually interacting with people and this is kind of cool. And I called in, Jeff D was on that day. We had a little conversation and of course they invited me to the after show dinner, which at the time was at Chili's at I-35 183. And I said, well, maybe I'll go. But I went. I was bored. That's one of the things that's come up over and over again. And then I'm going to sidetrack for a second. Somebody asked Amanda Knief about the American Atheist 50th Anniversary Convention that just happened here in Austin, about how they managed to have such a diverse representation of groups. We had the Black non-believers and the Hispanic freethinkers and stuff, and all of this. We had a very diverse showing, and they said, how did you manage to do that? And she said, I asked them. Turns out that's about all you have to do most of the time. And the whole reason that I'm standing here today and not sitting around somewhere else single in an apartment with the same guy that I was living with for 15 years is because somebody asked me to come to the after show dinner. I got involved with the group right off the bat, started showing up at the TV show the next week to work behind the scenes and kind of learn and help out, and everybody was nice and accepting of volunteers. And then in March of 2005, Jeff D forgot that it was his week, and I was on site, and Ashley said, hey, you want to go on and do a live TV show? And I was like, yeah, sure. And I went and looked at the clip this morning. I can't watch it because I had hair and stuff. But one of the comments on the YouTube clip is, Matt looks really nervous for about the first 10 minutes, and then 20 minutes in when the first call comes, it's kind of like the same guy that we've known all these years, which I don't think is accurate, but it was very, very rapid, the process of becoming comfortable sitting there on the TV show. Part of it is, of course, you're just in a room with your friends and there's a camera there. So it's not that big a deal. It's like talking on the phone with people. And then I recognize that I'm quite often a different person at different times on the show. Part of that is because I do have control. I can hang up on them whenever I want, which I have used correctly and incorrectly many times over the years. But I started doing the show. A year later, in May of 2006, we had the elections for the board of directors, and I had already been on the board previously when we just had co-chairs, but May 2006 is when we changed the Constitution to have president and vice president. And I was elected as president on that day, which I didn't have a lot of competition, but it still all caught me by surprise how quickly a lot of this was going. And I've been president for the last 7 years, until last week when I was ousted. A thundering coup of me saying, I think I'll go to LA. So I want to talk a little bit about what happened in those kind of 7 years to the ACA from my perspective and what I see maybe a little bit moving forward. And like I said, I didn't plan anything and I don't have massive amounts of notes. It's mostly anecdotes that I'm remembering. I remember shortly after I got elected, we wrote a press release that needed to be read on the steps of the Capitol in front of, we were going to have reporters and stuff out there. And I don't remember exactly what it was about. There were several of these, but this was the very first one. It was the first time I was going to speak in public as the president of the ACA. I'd been doing the TV show for a while already. But it was the first time I was going to be out in public speaking on behalf of the ACA, and we were going to have press out there on the steps of the Capitol, and this was just, ominous. I get up there and there's like me, 2 or 3 reporters from the news organizations that nobody cares about, and I was still, nervously standing here trying to make it through the short press release that we had written. Fortunately, that doesn't happen as much anymore, but it was the first kind of, now you really are here. You really are representing somebody. When I first started doing the TV show, and even today, I still, the show is sponsored by the ACA, but what the host and co-host say on the show is entirely up to them. Partially up to them. I guess there's always been some kind of, whoever the host is in control of the show, and I suppose if I really wanted to, you'd kick people off the show or whatever, but it's never really been necessary, because we're all already enough on the same page, even though we have some disagreements. But after that first press release, I realized that I had stepped into what I was terrified of doing, why I didn't become a preacher in the first place, which was actually speaking in public to people. And it was these meetings that helped kind of cure me of that. I gave 2 or 3 lectures fairly early on. One about the history of the Bible, another one about hell, another one about belief and knowledge. And giving those talks to the people from the ACA, and I even did a magic show here one time, which was not my favorite. I'm glad it's not online anymore. But it was giving those talks to those people kind of helped me realize what I was terrified of as far as public speaking seemed to be based on the fact that I had inner doubts and concerns, and I wasn't very confident in my beliefs all those years as a Christian. And being able to tell people, this is what I believe and this is why you should believe it. And now realizing just how boneheaded my reasons why were, that stuff went away. If you stand up and you're just talking about what you know, and you're okay with saying, I don't know, and you're not pretending to have answers that you don't have, especially if you're surrounded by friends and people who agree with you, then there wasn't any reason to be terrified of speaking. And it just kind of fizzled away. So we accomplished quite a few things while I was president of the ACA, and there's very, very, very little of it that I will actually take credit for. The secret to the ACA is, or has been, at least during my time, who's vice president. In all seriousness, the way the Constitution is put out, the president is kind of outward-facing as the spokesperson of the group, which I was already doing the TV show, so it didn't really have to add or change a whole lot. And the vice president is inward-facing. And I've had Doug Baker, Doug Rhodes, Jim Peoples, all behind me throughout this entire 7-year process, picking up everything that I forgot to do. Oh, there's a board meeting today? Sorry, can you take that? To steering the direction. And the only thing that I had to do was, until recently, set the agenda for the board meeting, although I managed to shuffle that off the agenda. I don't have to do that anymore. And it's been easy. And it's been too easy. It's one of those things, as long as the president's position is outward facing, and I'm okay with speaking in public, and I run around doing talks and lectures and debates, it just made sense to kind of stay there and keep pushing it in the direction that I wanted it to go. And we did get some things done where I contributed some at some level off and on. We've increased memberships over what they were when I first joined, but I think that has far more to do with the popularity of the show, which is everybody involved in the show is responsible for that. We've seen an increase in donations from where we were. And while I'd love to take credit for it, and I'll take partial credit, it's actually an idea that Keith raised, which was, hey Matt, you're sitting around answering all these emails, hundreds of emails a week. Why don't you just put a little blurb at the bottom of your signature line to let them know that if they want to donate, they can. And I said, okay. So I started doing that, and I think we saw like $3,000 in donations in the next couple of months just from that. So I mean, it's a good idea, Keith. We bought a building, How many people were there last week for the grand opening? Yeah, I wasn't. I don't know why I'm raising my hand. We bought a building. I love the fact that we had our grand opening last week, and people are like, "Oh, they finally joined this group that have a building when we've owned it for a year and a half." And there's a lot that we can potentially do with that, including moving on to the public access studio if it's required, or if it turns out to be a better place, even if it's not required. If we think we can have a better TV show by doing it at the building, then we should. And we've started setting up the studio there. I'm actually, how many people are familiar with Brian Brushwood and Scam School? It's a YouTube program. Brian would be thrilled to know that nobody here knew who he was. It's a YouTube show put together by a magician named Brian Brushwood that teaches like cool tricks and bar tricks and how to win free drinks when you're out. And Brian's here in Austin, and he produces the show here, and he's using the same capture cards that we have decided to use for the studio. So I'm going to talk to him about fixing the problems that Frank and I found so that we can actually do this. Obviously, we expanded viewership of the TV show, which is primarily because we started streaming it. I won't say that it's primarily because I took over as host. It's primarily because we started streaming it, and there's no other show like it really in the world. And so we hear from everybody everywhere. There's a bunch of stuff. Oh, we have position statements now. And I'll take partial credit for that since I wrote the first draft of them. But Jen's the one that actually got them done and published online. Finally. So it was something that I really wanted to see because, and there's a lot of bickering or infighting that occurs, and politicking behind the scenes about what does it mean to be an atheist? What does atheism mean? What's atheist activism? What are we doing here? What do we agree on? What don't we agree on? What should we be doing? And it seemed to me that simply saying we're an atheist group wasn't enough. The Constitution that we have specifically sets us up to foster the atheist community in the Austin area and to support church-state separation. But I didn't think that was enough to tell us what that means or what that means to us. And so we came up with a list of position statements that the board generally agreed were derived from support of church-state separation on a number of issues. We had some battles back and forth sorting it out, but I'm pretty happy with what we got. And I think it helps us in a lot of ways. One of the things that quite often happened on the show or in emails, when, as the president, I was the official spokesperson of the ACA, and yet there would be occasions where I would be talking about the ACA and what the ACA is doing, and I would have to say, but these views don't necessarily represent the ACA. So I knew what I needed was position statements that I could point to say, yeah, when I speak on behalf of the ACA, I can talk about issues that we think are derived from church-state separation, things like marriage equality and issues like that. So they're up online. There's a bunch of stuff that we didn't actually get done, and I'll leave that for the people who carry on afterwards. Various things like we're starting to see more variety on the board, just a little bit, just this year, but getting more active members involved to the point where they are willing and able to participate on the board is something I'd like to see moving forward. Every year we talked about writing an operations manual so that the how of what everybody on the board does doesn't get lost when people decide that they're done and moving on. That's something that I think probably still could be done. Various issues with website or interactions, stuff like that. What am I doing? Well, I'm not leaving the TV show. You guys are going to have to pretty much kick me off of that. I'm still on the Secular Student Alliance Speakers Bureau, and I'll be running around giving talks and lectures and doing debates whenever I can, whenever I'm invited. And actually, because I have a regular job and have to burn vacation for those, I'm booked for the rest of this year and most of next year already. And I can't afford to get sick because I'm booked on my sick days too. Yeah, so it turns out I'm going to be sick in October on a Friday, and I'll be sick in Omaha or something. So about four, maybe 5 years ago, it was shortly, I hadn't been president too long. There were groups that contacted us to say, you guys have this awesome group and you're doing so much. And you guys, I mean, we were and probably are one of the most active atheist organizations on the planet as far as things that we had scheduled. Now, there may have been only 2 or 3 people showing up at some of them, but we were, trying. I mean, we did board game nights, roller skating, we get the happy hour, and where a lot of atheist groups were meeting once a month for a lecture, we were meeting every week, multiple times a week, and people were like, this is nuts. I mean, how do you guys do this? Well, we just do. We set the things up, and there's 10 or 12 people who are going to show up to this, and there's 5 or 6 people who are going to show up to this, and there's 20 that are going to show up to this, and there's 2 or 3 to this other one, and it's going to rotate. And as long as we have somebody at these events who can say, yeah, hey, we're the ACA, welcome, come on in, the events keep going. And there was a period of time where I was at happy hour every week, and now I'm never at happy hour. And that shuffles around. We and continue to do a lot of things. Now I know the Houston group actually has more members and more subgroups. I mean, because Houston's so big, they actually have a couple different groups that meet at different places around, and they're doing a lot too. And it's good to see the other atheist groups doing more and more. But when they asked us, how do you guys do that? We tried to explain it. They're like, yeah, but how do I start a group like yours? And I hate getting asked that question. I hate getting asked, how do you start a group like yours? Because I didn't start this. How do you start a TV show like the one you're on? Because I didn't start it. How do you keep it going and bring in new members? Because I don't know. I just know that it has happened, and it's because, as best I can tell, a bunch of people were interested in working together.
A little bit of magic.
Yeah, a little bit of magic. But what we did was we said, look, we had a lawyer draw up a constitution and bylaws, which have established a foundation for the ACA. You can take those and use them. And just change the names and stuff, and it'll save you a little bit of legwork. So, look into how to set up a 501c3 nonprofit organization, take the constitution and bylaws, change it from Austin to insert your city here, and boom, you're started. And that happened. Atheist Community of Topeka, and several others. And so I had this idea that what really needed to happen was we should package that stuff together in both a literal, physical, paper-printed packet that you could hand to people who wanted to start an organization, and have it available online in the same kind of prepackaged format, and create a network of atheist communities. When the Coalition for Reason started out, I thought that's what they were going to do. And I'm not knocking them at all. Fred's done great stuff, and I love the billboard campaigns. We had a billboard here, even though we didn't really get a whole lot out of that billboard. The fact that it was there is still something that I will treasure as happening, while I was active in Austin. But Coalition of Reason didn't really do that. They're about taking existing groups and drawing people to them and trying to point at them and putting up billboards and having the conversations, and not about creating new groups. And so since they're not doing it, and since I'm no longer president of the ACA, one of the things that I'm doing going forward is I'm going to start working on a national organization that can serve as an umbrella for local atheist groups. And it's not a top-down structure. Each of the individual groups are still autonomous. They're their own. It's about getting, basically the vision is you show up at the website and you have the opportunity to look for a group, join a group, start a group. And the start a group section is going to have all the information that people need, what their options are. Do you go 501c3? Do you not bother? Do you stay, just let's meet up in the pub group, or do you go for something bigger? And getting them both the information that they need to get started, and then putting them in conversation with each other so that they can talk about what events worked better for them. Not that every event's going to work in every area, but they can talk about, hey, here's a speaker that we had at one of our events that nobody else seems to know about because they're not part of the national or international speaking consortium. I have my membership card now, so I can talk about it. But, we had Oak de Berg come talk to us a couple times. We've had a number of guest lectures up here that others that were great and other groups might benefit from if they only knew about it. And so giving them the ability to share access to those resources and that information is kind of the direction I'm headed. I found out when I was in LA, there's a couple of people who have already started the groundwork on something similar as a database resource. And so I'll be talking to them to see what we can do. That, and people keep asking when are you gonna write a book? Maybe never. I always seem to find something else to do that takes up more time, and in my day job I had a couple people to quit, so I'm working for 3 and on deadlines, and I worked 12 to 16 hour days all week this week. I don't know what's going to happen with the ACA, but I'm fat, dumb, and happy at this point because I'm incredibly confident and encouraged by what's going on and what's been going on. And it's not like I'm riding off into the sunset. I still live here, I still have a TV show, and I'll still be around. I just won't be going to as many board meetings as I went to this year, which I think was like 4. But
you made a few more.
I made a couple. But I'm incredibly encouraged by what's going on, and we've been getting more and more emails from people saying, "Hey, how do I get involved?" Now I don't know whether or not all these people are actually going to get involved, or whether there's a little. We don't want to just. There are people who have offered to be on the TV show where we have politely declined, because they're probably not the people that you want to be on a TV show. But so I don't know, but I've seen more of those showing up in email of this: how do I get involved? How do I participate? What can I do? And so I'm encouraged by that, and I already know that the ACA is in great hands and in better hands than it would have been had I continued. And I don't say that to beat up on myself. For the longest time I would just, I'm just some asshole from Texas. No, I am an asshole from Missouri who lives in Texas, and I'm good at what I do. I don't mind saying that now, but after 7 years of being at the helm of the ACA, it was more than time, more than past due, I think, for somebody else to take over, because I wasn't doing as much directing this past year. It was running, and I was happy with the way it was running, and I had lots of other things, and I want to see what other people will do with it, because we need more involvement, more diversity in the ACA and on the board, and I think we're going that direction. The last thing that I'm going to talk about, and then I'll open it up to questions, is so there's a lot of little schisms and bickering that happen in the various movements I'm involved with. And it doesn't matter if you're an atheist group that's talking about supporting feminist issues and equality, or whether you're talking about a conflict between atheists and skeptics. There's always going to be something, and there's something even within just the atheist movement. I gave a talk at the American Atheist Convention about skepticism and atheism, and I thought I had been crystal clear. I thought I had done exactly what I needed to do to make sure that everybody understood what I said. And then I got to LA and sat down with Jamie Inswitz from the James Randi Education Foundation, who was ready to just club me over the head like a baby seal. And it turns out, I'm sorry, do people like babies? It turns out that the source of disagreement was what I suspected that it was before we actually sat down and talked. And that is, we are using the same words to talk about different things. And we are assuming that because we are all rational people, that we are predominantly secularists, that when I say this word, everybody understands what I mean. And by way of example, at the American Atheist Convention, what I said was that I was tired of hearing people talk about how skepticism doesn't necessarily lead to atheism, because I think they're wrong, and skepticism does necessarily lead to atheism. And I talked about what I meant by skepticism, that it wasn't just a tool set, that it was an ideology that holds that beliefs need to be justified by evidence. And I talked about what I meant by atheism, in that it wasn't a claim of certainty or a positive assertion that gods didn't exist. It was the rejection of theistic claims. And I drilled down and pointed out that if skepticism doesn't support theism, then it necessarily supports atheism. If you begin with anti-theism, or actually hard atheism, as the null hypothesis, this is where you end up with the I don't believe, because I don't have a sufficient justification for it. But when I said skepticism necessarily leads to atheism, what some skeptics heard was, what I meant was philosophical skepticism necessarily leads to soft atheism. And what they heard was scientific skepticism necessarily leads to hard atheism, which makes me look crazy. Because scientific skepticism is all about the process, it's not about the conclusions. It only deals with testable claims, so it couldn't possibly actually reach any conclusion on an untestable claim. And so for me to assert that scientific skepticism somehow assessed an untestable claim and came to the conclusion of hard atheism, the positive assertion of there are no gods, that's just crazy. And they look at it like that. Doesn't matter the fact that I talked about what I meant by skepticism, what I meant by atheism. This was what entered his head. Meanwhile, when they say skepticism doesn't lead to atheism because skepticism has nothing to say about untestable claims, what I hear in my head is philosophical skepticism doesn't lead to a rejection of theism. And that means that philosophical skepticism must support theism, which you'd think that it would be obvious to everybody that that's not the case, and so what they say sounds batshit crazy to me. And it's because we're using the same words to point to two different things. And when we actually sat down and talked, I can't say this is the case for everybody on all sides. I'm done with the broad generalizations. But when we actually sat down and talked, we completely agreed, or 99% agreed, about skepticism in both contexts and atheism in both contexts, and what leads to what and what doesn't. And so in my talk in LA, I got up and offered an apology for saying that some people were being intellectually dishonest. Did a quick clarification of this, and sat down, and Jamie got up to give his talk at the end of the day, and went through and gave descriptions of the mission statements for various skeptic organizations, and talked about the JREF. He talked about scientific skepticism. He went through all the things on the limits of scientific skepticism. And at one point during his talk, he offered a definition of skepticism. And what he offered was the definition of philosophical skepticism. Beliefs need to be justified by evidence. And I talked to him afterwards, and I said, you realize that after the confusion that I brought on and me offering this correction, you went up and you offered these mission statements as if they were definitions of skepticism, which they're not quite. They're talking about what the organizations are going to do. And then you offered a definition of philosophical skepticism and didn't distinguish it from scientific skepticism. You kind of rolled it in. And there's a lot of this rolling in that happens everywhere. It happens whether you're talking about atheist skeptics, whether you're talking about atheists and people who are supporting social justice issues. While Jamie was giving his talk, PZ was tweeting. And Jamie hadn't even finished his talk, and PZ was saying, I'm done with the skeptical movement, and Jamie in Swiss is an incompetent ass. Oh no. And I'm sitting there in the talk going, why? You guys are in the exact same room. One's at the front of the room, one's at the back of the room. And some of the stuff has kind of reached a head. Here's the good news. Actually, before I get to the good news, at the American Atheist Convention, one of the things I pointed out was that it's probably in our best interest in these conflicts to pull each other aside privately and have these discussions, because you're more likely going to get a productive result than if I, from the pulpit, start talking about how wrong Jen is on something. And it just doesn't make any sense, and you build up walls. Now, what happened? Immediately, I don't want to engage in name calling. Idiots presumed that I was saying don't ever call anybody out in public, which is absolute nonsense. What I was suggesting was that when we should probably start in those situations to have those conversations behind the scenes, if better results are our goal, if it's possible. Obviously, if there's something time sensitive, go up, you need to address it public. If the person that you're talking about has demonstrated they're unwilling to have conversations, or you've had the conversations already and you're just in complete disagreement, by all means, this isn't about trying to hide any dirty laundry. I don't care about it. Let's have the conversations and let's promote other conversations. Let's try and do it in a way that it's actually productive. And the good news that I was going to get to is that almost nobody cares. There's a group of people online who don't participate in these events, who don't participate in the large conventions and stuff, there is more than one atheist community, there's more than one skeptic community. And what happens online is often very, very different from what happens in public. And the fact that there are a handful or even more people in one group or the other who are sniping, it's like this subgroup is sniping at this subgroup when there's a whole mass of people up here who are the broader atheist movement, who are the broader skeptic movement, who, yes, some of them see the sniping, but most of them are unaware of the bickering that goes on behind the scenes because they already get it, because they already understand that we're all one bigger community focused on making the world a better place, using reason and evidence, critical thinking, absent any appeals to religion. And yeah, there's probably going to be some bickering and there's probably going to be some growing pains, especially as we move from a teeny tiny percentage of the population to maybe someday before I'm dead, a majority of the population. They already know that that's the case, which makes it kind of silly for me to tell that to all of you because most of you were most likely in that position already. The only reason I bring it up is because as I won't be the official spokesperson for the ACA, unless Jen decides to appoint me, which that's in the Constitution, it's something you can actually do. But as I won't be doing that, the talks and lectures that I give, I'll be making an extra effort to make sure I'm not misrepresenting anybody. But I'm also making some changes in how I talk about things, and I'm trying to work more behind the scenes conversations to get people in agreement, or at least willing to set aside, we're going to argue about this one little definition in order to work together publicly to make things better. That and a national organization and more lectures and talks, that's where my focus is in the upcoming years. And I don't know how long I talked, but if you guys have questions, I'll do what I can to answer questions. But we need to take like a 5-minute break.
You do?
Yeah, I'm sick.
Okay.
So if I could, I hate to throw this on you, but if you want to talk a little bit about what happened at the elections and kind of what you see going forward, I'll let you as the new president come up and take a couple minutes.
Okay.
I'm a little bit.
Okay, all right. We'll do that. Okay. So, hi, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jen Peoples, and I've been the vice president of the ACA for, since 2009, so it's about 4 years now. I can do math right now. I was on the board before that. And so I'm now the president-elect of the organization. The new board officially takes over next month. Don Rhodes, I'm happy to report, as the incoming vice president. And we have a full board. I think the names of the new board members are up on the website already?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay, so we'll get that posted right away. So anyway, we've got some plans for using the building more often. So those of you who got a chance to come by and participate in our open house last week, I hope you enjoyed it. We do have plans to use that building more often. Jeff D contacted us about possibly resurrecting Godless Gamers and using the building for that. We'll probably be maybe resurrecting nonprofits at some point and using the building as the broadcast site for that. It might also go to video. So there's that. We're looking at a new phone system. So something that'll handle messages a little more efficiently and facilitate actually doing the show from the building. So there's a lot of stuff in the works in the next few months, I hope. Anyway, and if you haven't been there, then by all means get in touch with us, because Mark Vanderbrake is the guy that's been kind of setting up the library and everything. He's done a great job. He's also the guy that has set up some of our t-shirts and stuff, so we actually have t-shirts. We're gonna probably get some new designs in there as well, because one thing we were looking at, we've got ACA, or not ACA, but Atheist Experience shirts, but we don't have ACA shirts. So we need some ACA shirts so we can wear the colors and go to events and stuff. So anyway, yes, Mark?
What are the thoughts on how many hours per week the library should be open to the public? And how do people who may wish to staff the library voluntarily, who should they contact?
Actually, right now, I think if you just contact us at co-chair at is it atheist-community.org, we'll see about getting you worked into a volunteer schedule. Right now, it's by appointment. So if you want to go and take a look at the library, if you contact us, we can make the library available to you. But we're actually looking at possibly staffing the library and having regular hours.
Where is the building located?
The building is up on, it's 1507 West Canyon Lane. So it's just about centrally located. If we look at where most of our members are distributed in the Austin metro area, that's pretty much close to the central geographic center of where that is.
So, Vernon?
Between Vernon,
No.
between Vernon and
Yes.
Lamar,
Yeah,
a little closer to Lamar.
yeah.
It's got a
Actually,
big white sign, Free Thought Library with the ACA logo in
do you know where the Hay Cupcake Bakery is? It's only like half a mile from there.
Woodrow's across the street
Woodrow
roughly.
is the
That little
closest
car dealership.
fairly large street.
Yes, we're there.
So I'm back if people have questions.
You were talking about the various little schisms within the group, and one of them that I noticed and wanted you to have a chance to address was the notion of atheism plus, that atheism as not having a direction for social action, just saying I don't believe in God doesn't tell you which way to go, and that when people started this movement, that it created a lot of hostility about, okay, so now you're saying if I'm not a feminist, then I'm not a good atheist. And that kind of split has been fairly noticeable, even to those of us that never look at the blogosphere.
Yeah, sure. So Atheism Plus is an idea that was tossed around and started on the back channel of Free Thought blogs, in recognizing that we, the atheist community, especially those involved in atheist activism, are doing more than just atheism. We are already advocating for social justice and these other things that aren't contingent upon atheism. And we were running up against opposition from people who were like, no, you shouldn't do that. And by the way, who put you in charge? Don't take my atheist movement. Don't you tell me I'm not an atheist. And so a label was put on it, and immediately the label got blamed for creating a divide. Well, the divide already existed between the people who wanted to support certain issues and those who didn't. So the label didn't really do that. But what the label did was, despite every attempt to do the opposite, it added confusion. And I can't count the number of times. I've got videos up on my private channel where I was trying to explain, what this is and what it's not. It's not any sort of litmus test about who gets to be involved in the movement. I mean, I couldn't stop anybody from being involved in the movement. But it was about recognizing that the atheist community is people with, have different views. But by and large, we've already been working towards social justice issues, church-state separation issues, and all these things. And some people looked at it as a redefinition of atheism, which to me was bizarre because it was specifically atheism plus. This is now what atheism is. This is a sub-movement that's atheism plus. It's like if you had, the Society of American Magicians, and it turns out that the bulk of people who were active in the Society of American Magicians were also advocating for,
Atheism.
Yes. Yeah, thanks. We're also advocating for atheism, or we're advocating for skepticism, because the magicians and skeptics go together. I don't know where my brain is. Thanks, Russell. If that was happening, and a group in in SAM said, hey, we're going to create this sub-identity called SAM Plus. And that portion of SAM is going to be focused on magic and skepticism. And then the rest of the Society of American Magicians said, no, you don't get to redefine what SAM is, but we're not. It's a subset. Now, there's a lot of problems with what actually happened. First of all, early on, this was supposed to be a movement, and what they did was they set up a forum. And a forum isn't a movement. And what goes on the Atheism Plus forum, well, I can't say anymore because I've been banned. For legitimately violating their rules, even if that wasn't the intent. But I have no problem with people having forums and having discussions and doing. I'm more interested in doing things, which is why, while I advocated for Atheism Plus at the outset, and I still hold to the same values that Atheism Plus was espoused to support, because I didn't stop being a humanist or a decent human being, mostly. I'm not pushing it or pushing the label anymore, because I understand kind of how things got messy.
It's kind of like the new code of atheism.
Yeah, thanks for going the exact opposite of my entire clarification. I know I can count on you.
Not a question, but a comment. I wanted to thank you for addressing the schism thing, because I just started meeting people last week at the open house. One of the first questions I asked Don is because for those of us who are just at the point where we're ready to start externalizing our atheism, we read the blogs, we listen to the podcasts. There's humanists and there's skeptics and there are atheists, and they say they're all different, but they all sound like they're saying the same thing. Then you get the feminists and then the not feminists, and there's this thing out there called Atheist Plus, and PZ's getting pissed off about something. For those of us who are just now at the point where we're ready to reach out to a group like the ACA, it's confusing as hell.
Yeah.
And so I went to the open house last week, and I really didn't know what I was walking into. I felt very welcome and comfortable there, as it turned out. But I'm afraid you guys are turning off with these schisms. Not you guys, I don't mean to say that, but this is confusing those of us who are ready to reach out, and it might pull us back. And it took me a long time finally seeing that open house to finally get my feet out the door.
Well, thanks for doing that and saying it and coming back, because it should. That's the thing that I wanted to kind of address with all this is that there's a lot of growing pains that happen in this process, a lot of struggles with identity. Even just trying to put together the mission statements, position statements that we had in the ACA, there was pushback and there were rewrites, but it didn't turn into a big nasty fight. And while the internet is probably one of my 3 or 4 favorite things on the planet, because it's just amazing, it can also be a poisonous cesspool that is depressing as hell. And I like to just, my point is to remind people that we need to be careful. Like, I love PZ, and I love Jamie, they're both friends of mine. And the fact that they disagree on something is, well, that's kind of interesting. And they're both prominent members of their respective movements. But they're not the sum total of anything, and neither am I. And if anything, there are probably almost certainly things that I've done and said that have kept people from participating in the ACA. Almost certainly. And the only thing that I can try to do is strive to correct those when I can. Not correct them when it's not really something that needs, like I haven't actually done anything wrong, somebody just objects because of who I am and what I said. And do what I can to make sure that people know that the position statements that the ACA has, they're not conditions for membership. And they're not conditions for participation. And they're not conditions to, for example, be my friend. I don't limit my friendships just merely based on who agrees or disagrees with me. And so while some of the little bickering occasionally gets amplified up, the broader community is strong and growing and positive and actually making progress. And no matter what negative things people are saying, overall, I have not been more positive about the direction that all of those groups are going and generally going together.
John? Been a lot of talk about fractiousness, and ACA's had its history of that. I've been to a lot of board meetings that were maybe a little bit on the bitter side. I have seen the organization talk about dissolving with it in mind that of the big movers in the movement, organizations are mostly foundations. Democracy is very hard. During your reign as president,
Tenure.
thank you. We have had more.
Don't say rain, I told you not to say rain.
We have had more unanimous votes than in the whole rest of the history of ACA. I feel like we've been able to disagree and move on without bitterness. And I really like the way that you've led the organization and the place we're at today. Really
Thank you.
appreciate that.
Yeah, I don't know about, I mean, obviously you were here when I wasn't. It's one of those things where, how do you start the TV show? How do you start the organization? I didn't start anything, stop asking. But I wasn't here for those votes beforehand because I wasn't in the group. The analytic in me that like is hypercritical on the drive home from the show, don't get me wrong, I greatly appreciate your comment. But as you're saying it, I'm going, well, I guess that just means I didn't pick issues that were difficult enough for us to address. So that's up to you to do this. Anybody else?
Yeah, there's various organizations in town that I was wondering if ACA is thinking of doing, say, joint events with, especially getting younger people involved.
Yeah,
I was thinking the Secular Student Alliance at UT, there's a humanist organization at UT, there may be one starting at Synods. There's also the Unitarian Universalist Church. There's various other sort of humanist secular organizations that having joint events with might also overcome that perception of a schism. And also with Jen as well, having more women involved along with Beth too, women in secularism conferences next weekend. So,
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if these are
Yeah,
possibilities.
I'm actually the university liaison, and so I am in contact with those university students. We've actually tried to do a couple of joint events in the last couple of years, and it's just been a matter of timing, getting things together. We have actually done some stuff in the past where we've co-promoted events. It's
It's
something
not
we're
always-
definitely working on.
That's not always the easiest thing to do. I'm sure if there was ever a big thing, that it would be a lot easier to get those groups, but I mean, people have their different focuses. I was gonna point out that Jen's been the university liaison, but now that she's president, maybe we need a new university liaison, someone with expertise in the university arena, to step in and work with those organizations, not throwing out any names or candidates. But, it's, on occasion, we've done joint events, as Jen was talking about, and I'm hoping that there'll be more of those. I know Chuck, who's not here today, Chuck pretty much runs our National Day of Reason thing every year, and some years it's been him and two other people down there. But mostly, that's because the National Day of Prayer in Austin has had fewer attendees than are in this room. For at least, I wasn't there this year, but a couple years ago when we went, we were like, why are we even bothering to show up? There's more of us than there are of them at this point. But if that flipped, I mean, I saw billboards up all over the place, so they're spending lots of money. Billboards are not cheap. Spending lots of money on the National Day of Prayer in Austin to get a handful of people to turn up. Usually it's like the music group from one church and a handful of people from another, and that's it. This is gonna sound perfect. I'm thrilled to watch them burn through their money to no effect from now until the end of time.